Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Decloak podcast. And today's episode is a very special episode because it has a central focus on mental health within cyber. And my special guest, Nick Hilderman, is actually someone on a mutual Slack channel that posted recently an amazing slide around mental health. And for reference, Nick is a seasoned security practitioner who's obviously been impacted and had direct impacts with mental health throughout his career, and he now speaks openly about his story and hopes to help others avoid the pitfalls of burnout. And welcome, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting about this. Cyber and mental health are pretty tied together, and sometimes not in the most positive manners. So let's chat.
Excellent, and absolutely. And then what we'll probably start with, Nick, is just a brief overview of you and your career.
Yeah, so Nick Hilderman, again, I've been in security for about 15 years, IT for about 25, and leadership for about 10. I've seen lots of different industries, ag, machinery, tech, startup to scale up, really Fortune 500 as well. But it kind of drives me nuts when people say Fortune 500 because I could have been a cashier at Walmart and you can still say Fortune 500. So it's almost meaningless when I hear that. But either way, worked for some big companies, some small companies, seen quite a few different things. I can't say I've seen it all. I don't think anyone has in cyber. My career started, I worked for a small retail industry out in Calgary, Alberta here, where we started a computer shop. And we started building that. I worked for them for about 12 years. And
Nice.
So we really helped scale that company up very, very quickly. It's now across Canada and it's doing quite well. Obviously, I'm no longer there. I haven't been there for probably 20 years now, at least. So after that, I wanted to get into a corporate environment. And the biggest challenge for me was that I only have a high school education. I went to Mount Royal University for about 4 months. Out here, it was a college at the time, did some networking courses and thought this is just boring. It was Windows 95 back then. I could have wrote these courses at some point. I just said, this isn't for me. So I went to a company called Metaphor at the time, which is a consultancy company, and said, I want to get into basically a new company in a corporate environment. And they said, well, we can place you in the help desk because your skills are all retail based and you just don't have the background. So I took it, half my wage. At the time, I just had my second kid and just started my career over. Got into a company, which was an agricultural company, did some help desk work there and moved very quickly through the ranks there. They brought me into the NOC. I ended up leading the NOC at one point, and then I got offered a job into security. One of my, future mentors at the time ended up bringing me in, and like everything I said, I don't know security. I don't know any of this. I don't know networking. I don't know security. This isn't what I do. And they said, we're not going to bring you in for the technical stuff. We want your other skill set that you're bringing in, which I didn't know I had at the time, but I guess customer service, being able to speak fluidly and, take technical jargon into real, actual measures was a big thing. So came into security there, moved up the ranks there, ended up in risk management at a different company after that, led the risk management team, ended up leading after that company. So I went to a machinery, largest caterpillar dealer in the world called Finning. Went there and worked for them for about 5 years, I believe, and led their risk program, and then moved on to a company called Hexagon or Novotel, A&P, a part of Hexagon, led their security program there, and then moved on to Avik, which was the last company I was at, and led their security program there as well. So kind of running around in different places. That's the gist of my career. It's always been about hustle for me. I don't think hustle culture is dead. I was never the smartest guy in the room, but I tried to make sure that I brought the smart people with me, and we just had good directives. So that's my career in a nutshell, I guess.
Excellent. I love that mindset. I don't think many people actually talk about the hustle of cyber or looking at many different industries and trying to taste as many flavors as they can get. And I think that's something I hope that we hear more of in the podcast is, people kind of get a bad rep for things like job hopping or maybe sticking to one or two specific industries and never really kind of broadening their horizons. And I guess for me, I think, there's kind of similarities between you and I. But like I worked for a company who started in kind of hospitality. They moved into like manufacturing and then EPOS and then multitude of SaaS. And, it always fascinates me, I think certain industries are worse than others. They're either super monolithic or they're like incredibly fast paced, and that then kind of leads to obviously the topic we'll speak about you later is obviously the mental health aspect of it. And I think these industries obviously bring many different challenges, and then moving into like the actual challenges you're faced within cyber industry. Again, I made reference to a slide that you'd posted in a Slack channel, and I was completely blown away by it. How could someone out there be so open about the topic of mental health and then detail their story? And again, feel free, Nick, if you want to kind of talk about that. These challenges that you've had in your life. How you've kind of overcame them, and hopefully people can take some solace from this and maybe learn and help them build coping mechanisms.
Yeah, the mental health side is very interesting. I'll get into that story in a second here, but I wanted to just touch on your thought about how people jump industries before we move into that. And it was funny because when I worked for the agricultural company, my leader at the time came to me and tried to keep me because they were looking to shift a lot to an outsourced model, but they really wanted to keep me. In fact, I've been everywhere I've been. Everyone's wanted to keep me except for the last company that unfortunately I got laid off at. Again, not my reasoning. It was just when I asked them about that, they basically said, well, sometimes things don't make sense. It is what it is. So as a security person, you get used to it. But for that one where he tried to keep me, my comment to him was that I don't want to see if it's an ag problem or a problem with this company. I want to see if I can go get some knowledge from other companies. Is it this company's problem or is it an actual security issue? And so by jumping these different companies, it's given a lot more wealth of knowledge of there's some companies that are like, they solved this in about 10 minutes. And other companies that are sitting on that still for years because they don't have the answer. And so I love the idea of bringing a wealth of information from different sizes and orgs because it just brings you a broader knowledge base, right? So with that said, let's move on to the mental health discussion. So this was a couple roles ago. I can speak to what happened. So I'm an A-type personality. I love to work. I'm driven. I drive. I go. This is just what I do. I'm passionate about what I do, and I love it. But the challenge is that you sometimes don't see the pot gaining water before it boils over. And I continued to do so. And I didn't feel like my stress levels were high. I was happy in my career, happy in my job. My team was great. My boss was great. I had great mentors, great mentees. Just out of nowhere, I think I was about 38, 39 years old. And this was pre-COVID that this happened. I just went to work one day and it just couldn't think. A little bit of a gray fog. Had some pins and needles in my arms and legs. And I thought, maybe I'm just not eating properly. So I sit down to eat and I'm sweating and I'm hot and I'm cold. And I'm going, I'm having a heart attack. I'm 39 years old. I'm relatively healthy. I could, what the hell's going on? Sat there and just kind of hoped that it would go away. It went down for a bit and then it came back worse. And so I asked a colleague to take me to the emergency room. Ended up in emergency. They gave me an Ativan, which is a pill that kind of knocks your brain out and says, calm down. And it worked. And so I knew what that was at that point. And it's panic attacks. And from someone who's never had panic attacks, never really had any trauma, never had anything like this before, this just came on and hit me like a bus. And so I thought at the time that I could just get through it. And I thought it was work stress, whatever. I didn't know what it was. So I'm looking for a reason of why. And that was my biggest fail point. Don't look for why. Just look for how to get through it. Because there was no reason. Like the guy that let me go said last time, he says, sometimes things don't make sense. This did not make sense to me in any way, shape, or form. So I tried to go back to work and I kept having these aftershocks, almost like they were coming back, rumblings of these panic attacks because I wasn't on any medication. I wasn't seeking help. I just thought they'd go away. Again, suck it up, right? That's the personality that I am, suck it up. And so I tried to suck it up, but it wouldn't let me. And so I ended up at one point where I couldn't operate anymore. I was no good to my job, no good to my family. It's really hard to say, but the reality is I couldn't do anything. And my brain was almost to the point where it felt like it was broken, it was deficient, and something wasn't working. And I couldn't control it. That's the worst part. So I guess from that point, I almost felt like I hit rock bottom where I'm stuck in the house. I can't leave. I can't operate a vehicle because you start panicking and freaking out. And I've got a lot of stories during that time that made me feel like just lesser of a person. And it just killed me. Now, on the positive side of things, without going through the whole presentation, the good job I was working for, the Caterpillar dealer, the Finning, did an amazing job of supporting me to get back on my feet. My boss came to me and said, look, you got to get out of here for a month and sort yourself out. Right. And so I went on disability for a bit, and then I sought all the advice I could. I said, I'm going to take a multi-pronged approach here. I mean, I had to swallow my pride, park my ego, and say, medication, doctors, you name it, like therapy, everything I could take, I would do, because I wanted to get out of that as soon as possible. That's that hustle culture coming back. How do I get back to work? Because that's what I love. And right now I can't do it.
I think that's an interesting, the kind of observation I've taken is like, it seems to be a kind of typical thing, right, within the industry or any industry. Men don't want to admit that they maybe have a problem, and that kind of builds into a form of ignorance. We become so bogged up with the fact that there's a pride element, and we don't recognize those triggers that ultimately cause these events. And I'm interested to know, like, when did you start to feel like things were coming back to normal? Were you able to have clarity and understand certain triggers? Was it literally because of the hustle mindset? You just worked all the time? Did you kind of find like a form of root cause? And is there any kind of advice that you would offer to people who find themselves in a situation?
I think it was, well, let's talk about the recovery first. I think that's the first one I'd like to talk about. Is the recovery was long, and it's still going on. I mean, this is several years ago, and I'm still to a point where I'm still in recovery. I feel like I'll never be away from it. I think it's a journey, not a destination, and I'm going to keep going that direction. And every day I just take it a day at a time. And I think that was part of the challenge of what set me off, is I'd always look 2-3 days or a week or a month or 2 years in advance, and that would just start to eat at you. Because there's something called twisted thinking, where you think, if I do this later on down the road, it's going to cause that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's always a negative thing that's down the road. The positive things never get looked at when you have that kind of mindset. And so I just think giving yourself some grace, taking risks, and being aware that just because you're late for a meeting doesn't mean you're going to get fired, right? Like, that's the biggest thing, is you have these little things that start building up on you. I remember one of the things that would set me off was even driving downtown to find parking. And I mean, I just panic, because what if I can't find a spot? What if I don't have the money? What if my credit card doesn't? There's all these what ifs that go through your mind, and that's just anxiety buildup, and that led to my burnout as well. So as far as recovery goes, it was really slow. I had to take one step at a time. And so when I hit rock bottom, when I couldn't leave the house, I was just a shell of a human. And I felt so bad for my wife, my kids, my family watching me go through this, because I couldn't do anything about it. Like, I couldn't just make it go away like that. So what I did is took it a step at a time. And I'd say, okay, today I'm just going to get out of bed. And then the next day, maybe I'll go downstairs and sit and watch TV if I can, and if I can't, that's okay too. Let's just go back to square one. And when I'm ready, I'll start going to a point where I'd go to my car and just sit in it and be like, okay, I've gotten a little further. Now I'll start it the next day. Okay, I've gotten a little farther. Now I'll just drive maybe up the block a bit and park, gotten further, until just finding those levels before, right? And that recovery took a long time, and it's still going on. There's still things that probably would trigger me for a panic attack or anxiety. But I find that after I've had all those approaches to help with, finding people with similar issues, talking openly about it, getting onto a medication that might help, even though I don't want to be on it, I understand that sometimes you need it. Maybe not forever. Maybe it is forever. I don't question that anymore. And then getting therapy and just getting that help around you of your social circle. I found that was all therapeutic for me, and it all helped me move forward. So recovery is definitely a small step, very, very slow. Don't rush it. If you rush it, you're just going to be back at square one, because I tried to rush it one day. I remember I got in the van in the car with my family. I got about 2 blocks away. That was it. Panic attack set in. I had to pull over, and I was almost in tears, saying, I'm just such a failure. I can't even drive my family somewhere. And that's not me. Like, that just was not me. I'm not that kind of person. So it hurts. It hurts. You have to swallow your pride and realize that you're sometimes not in control. And that's exactly, the recovery is just about accepting that and moving on step by step.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing you'd mentioned there was like kind of a visualization. It sounded like you couldn't visualize anything positive. And I think when people are suffering, we tend to just by default visualize the most negative thing that we can.
Yes.
And that in turn kind of builds us into like some sort of a prison, maybe. And, it's kind of difficult, when you're trying these steps each time to kind of break out of that situation, that it almost feels like it's going to take 10 million steps before things start to become more positive, but there's so many things from cognitive behavioral therapy
Yes, and I've done
right
that.
through. Yeah, I was going to say right through to like philosophy, where the power of visualization, honestly, like how many people we've seen that are sports, like obviously the athlete in the background there, the
Yeah.
jersey, how many people have been like just something in their brain just clicks and then they fortify themselves. Mental resilience is something we've spoken about a few times within the podcast, and it's easier said than done, right? Like this is a scenario where you've had everyone support you. What about the scenario where nobody supports you
That's
and you're
tough.
just like, I know, and you're just cast aside and you kind of feel it's your fault. Then in reality is it's maybe a chemical imbalance. It's low testosterone. It could literally be, you've not had a vacation. I remember one time I didn't take a day off for about 9 months. I was in a role. I was so determined to be a success because everyone said, oh, well. And I was like, that's unacceptable for me. It's like, we want to be the best. Then you get to a point where you're like, I'm just a number. They don't give a shit.
Yeah.
They've got no ambition. I can't single-handedly drive this for everybody. Then you can obviously start to do retrospective. You get rid of the imposter syndrome. And then you're like, right, it's okay just to do 9 to 5, and
Yeah.
kind of taking it away from there. But yeah, I mean, because is there anything that you kind of feel, is there anything that you've tried? Like, is there like anything you would recommend? Like, let's just say meditation, is there anything you just say, hey, I need to listen to this album every day because like these guys rock, or I listen to some Chopin, or, is there anything you've kind of helped build in terms of coping strategies or mechanisms?
Yeah, it's funny because there's so many things. And my personality type, I don't believe in the whole essential oils, lavender, and
Yeah.
this and that. But you have to park your ego. And the funniest thing was that I remember having a panic attack one night and I popped open some lavender to smelt it and it brought me back down. Now, I can sit there and challenge that like crazy and say, that's stupid. It shouldn't work, blah, blah, blah. No, the biggest thing is you have to park your ego. And as a guy, it's sometimes hard to do. You want to
Yeah.
challenge everything and you want to question it and say, this is bullshit. You can't do that. And I said, well, that's not the case. So let's get rid of that ego, park it, and just accept the fact if it is working. Sometimes
Yeah.
placebo can trick the brain, and you got to accept that that's okay if it gets you to the next step. And that's where, for me, it was just I'd fill my tool belt with tools. That was it. You name something, I was going to try it out because I was not going to stay in this position forever. My approach was that I'm going to get back to work, back on the horse. I've got a family to feed. I've got, I've got stuff to do. And as you can see, I'm always walking on a treadmill when I do these conversations because I have energy to burn and I need
Yeah.
to put it somewhere. And it usually ends up going to the company or the people I'm working with. And so get as many tools you can, right? Find what works for you. I could say that this worked for me, but it may not work for the next person. The idea is park your ego, try new things, because if you're not trying new things, you're just sitting there saying, well, I don't want to try that. That's dumb. You don't know if it's going to work, And had I not sat down and like actually tried the lavender, just said, shut up, ego, park you, let's see what happens, that panic attack could have gotten really bad that night. So there's nothing I can say that's going to work better for everyone. For me, walking obviously helps, being energetic, exercising, getting out, spending time with the family, camping, getting back to nature, sitting in the yard, listening to the birds, just getting yourself grounded again
Yeah.
and getting away from work, and understand that you can be a very strong employee, a great person, and not have to burn yourself out doing it. And that's one thing I've trained most of the teams that I work with are give yourself some grace. You are good at what you do. You are amazing. And most of the people I work with have been just incredible human beings. So if you're late for a meeting, most of the leaders are going to be like, yeah, that's fine. Schedules are busy. We get it. No one's going to hold you back because of that. So I think just understanding and giving yourself some grace is a big piece of it for me that might work for everybody.
I love that. It's actually, I can feel myself smiling, like, the inspiration, like hearing listen, everybody loves a comeback, and it's like, personally, I've been there, cast aside and kind of feeling, what am I going to do next? And then, I kind of get into some competitive sports and it was like, having, when you got that win, And it was like, this is incredible feeling. But when you had a loss, I was like depressed for days on end. Like, absolutely. I hadn't felt like that since I was actually in competitive sports like 20 years ago.
Yep.
And you're just like, well, something's not right here. And it's about enjoying yourself as well. Take yourself out of that position of the madness of cybersecurity. I think Conor McGregor said he had I think a very famous saying about the game consumes you or the game drives you insane or something like that, right? And it's kind of like cyber. I think we're so hell bent on becoming these defenders and these protectors of the realm. Like we take it so seriously, and it's just like, these things you need to, as you said, you need to check out now and again, and definitely kind of build those steps that help fortify you. And then kind of moving into like, is there anything like a specific topic that you wanted to discuss that you feel needs relevance and clearing up within the industry? Now, again, we're obviously speaking quite heavily about mental health. Is this a case of, I'm just going to throw something in like, are companies not doing enough? Is the industry not doing enough? And I certainly do not want to alienate any of our female audience members as well, and people that have been on the channel. But obviously, we're speaking about this because I think the numbers say that it's impacting men more. I don't know if it's just because women are more resilient, they can multitask, they can deal with things, they have maternal instincts, whereas men are very task orientated and feel like a failure. So I just wanted to put that out there before.
Yeah.
Like obviously, we get some negative feedback. But yeah, is it a specific topic you think needs relevance?
Well, I think what you're touching on is important too, because when I first came into security, there wasn't a whole lot of females represented, and that was a big issue. I'm a huge proponent of DEI. I support it 100%. I think it's very important. The teams that I've worked with and worked for have also been, more than 50% female or visual minorities on them, because it's important. And I think bringing those different cultures together is huge, absolutely huge. The just the velocity we could work at and the knowledge that we had on my previous team here was unbelievable. Like, these are all-star individuals that may not have had a chance. And so bringing different people from different cultures, different demographics in is incredible. It just makes the teams way better. And I 100% will always have teams like that in the future. I think it's very important. As far as something that I don't like about cyber, or it's something that irks me a little bit, I think we've actually made it a lot harder to bring in those individuals. We're asking for these roles. Like I said, I got laid off about 6 weeks ago. I'm even looking at different roles and just seeing what's out there. And some of these roles that they're asking for entry level are astronomical. I mean, you're asking for someone to have a master's. You're asking for someone to have 5 years experience just to come in. And I think we've become a barrier to entry into cyber. And it's just something that kills me, because there's so many talented people. In fact, I built a rotation program at my last company that helped people get into cyber and give them the experience they need, because people couldn't get it. And so we did that. And some of these folks have moved on now into cybersecurity careers from non-cyber careers. The previous roles that I was in, we did the same thing. We had people from HR come in and have great careers and move on, and different places, because you don't have to be a technical genius to be in cyber. It's about evangelizing, doing the right things, and really changing people and culture. Technology and tools can be learned. Some of this other stuff can't. And I think the biggest thing that irks me is that as cyber leaders, we have to do better. And we have to understand that you have to give people a chance. You can't just ask for someone to be like, well, you were a sysadmin for 10 years, great, come in as a junior. No. If you're a junior role, I want to teach you that as you come in. Bring the skills that you've got, let's capitalize on them, and help you grow into a cyber expert and a practitioner. Right now, we're not doing that. Like I said, I look at these roles and these postings, and it's just unbelievable. You'd almost have someone like me who's been in IT and security for 10 years and still applying for those roles and might get denied. And I'm like, I've been doing this for a long time. So it's very, I can imagine the mental health hit it takes on someone coming out of school, looking at the job market and saying, I can't possibly do any of this. They're asking for so much, and there's no way that I can get in. And so that's where leaders like myself and everyone that's in that leadership realm needs to understand that we have to help them. We have to open those doors. We got to take some chances, because you're going to turn your back on some amazingly talented individuals if you don't.
Let's talk about something that might be keeping you awake at night: cybersecurity. According to Vanta's latest State of Trust report, it's the #1 concern for UK businesses. That's where Vanta comes in. Whether you're a startup, growing fast, or already established, Vanta can help you get ISO 27001 certified and more without the headaches. Vanta allows your company to centralize security workflows, complete questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risks to help your team not only get compliant, but stay compliant. Stop stressing over cybersecurity and start focusing on growing your business in 2025. Check out Vanta and let us handle the tough stuff. Head to vanta.com/decloak to learn more. Because when it comes to your business, it's not just about keeping the lights on, it's about keeping everything secure. Thanks.
I think you're absolutely spot on. It feels like with the emergence of FANG, like your Netflix and Facebook and everything, they've created this hyper competitiveness where the bar is so high where they want 90% of their entire company to be a bar raiser, and then 10% of really good people that are very experienced, and they want them to compete against each other.
Yeah.
Rather than having it 10% bar raisers and 90% of a mixed diversity of different elevations. I mean, how else can you make a company successful? That hyper competitiveness is a really bad toxic culture and has led to things like, misogyny, racism, sexism, all these other kind of components that are driving away diverse individuals. That's everything from gender, that's everything from, every kind of spectrum that you can imagine. And I also feel like with that bar being raised so high, that really creates the mental health impacts, because if everyone's competing against each other, backstabbing each other, and then you're alienating the 10% of your colleagues that are in that bucket that will never escape, but then they compete against each other to then join that club. It's like, I'm sure Zuckerberg has spoken about these types of approaches before, and it's like they say that they're trying to change it, but it's like you can literally change it overnight with the click of your finger, but they won't. And that, for me, is a poor return on investment, because that 90% bar raiser mindset is you're paying them like millions in salaries, rather than having a diverse pool, training and mentoring, and building a really diverse culture where people feel empowered, people feel they can make mistakes and they can learn from them. Because if people don't learn from them, then they actually introduce more risks into your organization, even though they might be superstar unicorns that can code 10 trillion lines or whatever. Are they going to be aware of certain elements because they've never had their knuckles rapped before, or they've never been mentored to a point where they understand what's going on? And I think that's been driven as well by the big four audit companies like KPMG, Deloitte, then your McKinseys of the world in terms of consultancies, where it's this whole Ivy League mindset. It's like I used to see all the time you needed an accountancy degree to get a job at the big four. I'm like, that, like, for an entry level, if I'm doing like, I don't know, a physics degree and then I don't know, or whatever, and I'm like, they're asking me to get a chartered accountancy, it doesn't compute when it's like, hey, we've got I don't know, an entry level role, graduate, 5 years Kubernetes experience. Well, you're only in university for 4 years. If you're lucky. It's just like these sorts of things, back to your point, is like, it's so crazy. I had someone on the podcast, Leanne, who'd mentioned about really being diverse and spreading that spectrum in the individuals. And some of the superstars that Leanne has been able to bring into the organization, mentor, and let them run and learn, that then in turn creates the best type of culture you can have to then reduce mental health impacts, But yeah, do you have any kind of ideas on how that could change? Do you feel it's worse in the US or the specific industry in the US? I'm interested to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a regional thing or not. I mean, I've worked for companies that, again, are across the globe in different areas. And it's just a matter of, I think it might be a generational thing. I don't know for sure. I don't have a science or data behind this, but I think from what I've observed, it seems that, as I recall, called the old guard is still bringing in people that look, sound, and appear just like them, right? It's easy to build your circle around that because that's what you're around. Whereas now I think the generation that I'm in, I'm 43 years old at the time of this podcast anyways. So it's something that I think we need to change now. We have to address. And so by me being a part of the DEI teams and talking talking openly, when I see too many Caucasian males, even though I am one, if there's too many of them coming up in senior leadership, I call it out. Now, some companies may not like that very much. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe that'll end up being a termination for me coming because I say it, but I think it's the right thing to do. And I can sleep well at night knowing that we need to hire the right people for the right role and not necessarily just because they look the same as everybody else. And I think it's actually becoming a negative statement for companies. That's the first thing I look for often is who's your senior leadership team? How diverse are you from top down? Because if you're not, I don't know, maybe you're just talking out your ass at that point. You're not really doing what you say you're going to do. And I'm not interested in companies like that. I want people to be the ones that are actually driving change and doing the right thing. And so I think it's really important. That's the biggest thing. And I think as far as what we can do to try to improve it is just give people a chance. You know, don't shy away from bringing people from different demographics that have been working. If they have skills in something different than cyber, you can teach the technology stuff. I remember sitting into when I said how they brought me into security, I didn't know a thing about security. I'll never forget sitting in those meetings and they're talking about IDS, IPS, IPAM, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, this stuff just flying over my head. I don't have a damn idea of what's going on. But then I, take notes, understand it, research, grow, figure out what it is and just go from there. And it brought me to where I am today, just being a sponge. So if you give people the opportunity, they're the ones that are often hungry and want to be there. They don't have to be there. They want to be there. They're choosing that path. And then when they get there in their season, then they can decide if they want to stay or not. I hope they do. But again, we have to change how we do things in security so that we keep the talent. We talked about this a little earlier before the podcast started, that you've had people come in and then leave just due to the way the industry is. I've seen it too. And I mean, even to the point right now where I'm looking for a role and I'm seeing what's out there and I go, it's pretty sparse. And I'm going, well, maybe it's not the place that I need to be now. Yeah. And it would be terrible for me to leave because I think I could bring so much to it. But if there's no opportunities, and that's what these grads are facing, just overwhelming odds to try to get in. And if they can't, we're going to see a lot of people walk. And we scream and shout that we need talent, but we're not letting them in the door. So it's really challenging at this point. We have to take a little bit better stance and say, let's try. Let's take some risk, because sure, we're risk averse in security, but that's not how you run a business. You have to take a little bit of risk, and that's how we can make it better.
Absolutely. And I think you're spot on, because I think there's obviously a contingent of individuals that tend to mirror themselves. And that then leads to that whole toxic situation, why people are leaving the industry and everything else. And I think people or maybe hiring managers or leaders are just scared to trust. Take a punt on someone. One of the best hires I ever had was from a complete different industry. They had an audit mindset, project management mindset, and I'm like, why not take a punt? And it was one of the best hires I ever made. And I think obviously you're out of the industry at the moment. And sometimes that gives you perspective on, is it really for you? Obviously I mentioned before we recorded this, someone that had left the industry that I knew when ultimately sparked this whole podcast. And, for me, I couldn't accept that. Personally, I was like, what can I do to try and change this within the industry? Because if we are driving away graduates or people from high school, college, whatever it may be, or a complete different industry or line of work, we need to create a pathway, because these people could be the thing that helps create the future of cyber, rather than, these antiquated approaches where, I'm not hiring that person because they don't know anything about risk management. It's like, shit, you can apply it to, like, do you wear a seatbelt when you're in the car? Yeah, that's risk management.
Exactly.
It's like these kind of, that people don't think that anymore. And, I'm interested, Nick, is there any other kind of industry or something that you would maybe look towards? Is cyber burnt you out completely, or is it just like you just have to take your foot off the gas? I'm interested because that person I mentioned before we recorded, they're looking to just move into a complete different industry altogether. So I'm interested to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I said, I was never a cyber person coming into it. I was always about just making things better, growing the people around me, and doing the best that I can as a hustler, and just try to move forward. for me, it was funny because even through my career in cyber, I kept going outside of cyber to find ways to marry different things into cyber. So I've got my Six Sigma green belt. I went out and got that and figured out, well, how can I measure anything? And that's the whole goal. In cyber, your biggest fail point is that we often don't measure what we're doing. And if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. And so Six Sigma was a continuous improvement approach, DMAIC, and all these different things that you can bring together to say, well, how can I now use that to quantify risk management, factor analysis of information risk as well. FAIR, I tried taking that and looking into that of how do I take that and bring that and marry that together with this Six Sigma and everything else, because a lot of it comes down to, I want to be able to speak the same language as the executives in the board, which is dollars and cents. And how do I show that? And to quantify it makes it easy. Qualified metrics are like low, medium, high. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I walk into a room and I say, well, that was, tell me what fast means to you. Someone's going to say a cheetah. Someone's going to say a jet. Someone's going to say the earth spinning. Everything's different. So you have to be able to take that and put a measurement scale the same. And that's where I thought continuous improvement and measurement was very important to me, because it really helped show how important cyber is to those groups. Now, I don't need to be in cyber to use that. I can do that anywhere. So I can go anywhere and say, well, now I can take continuous improvement and say, let's make things better. Let's save some money. Let's be more effective. Let's be operational and just be higher velocity for lower cost without impacting the people, right? And that's the biggest piece. So that's the biggest one for me. The other one is people driven. I mean, I always tell people that maybe I should have been in HR, because I love watching people grow. I love watching careers grow. And in fact, when I see someone move into a leadership role or somewhere and I help them get there, that's probably the biggest accolade I can get to myself. And just I pat myself on the back and say, I helped that. It wasn't because of me, but I helped a little bit of that. And that's what I want to keep doing. So all these things kind of marry together into different areas, but I just had an affinity for computers, for security, and I seem to kind of just naturally flow between these different areas. And so I think just find what you're passionate about, right? I mean, you get that question all the time from HR. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And my answer is always the same. I just want to be happy. I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care, all these different things. All I want to do is be happy, which means I want a successful, rewarding career or job. I want to work with great people. I want to watch people grow. And I just want to see people in the company I'm with succeed. That's it, right? And I mean, if I can be a part of that, that's it. I mean, I'm living the dream at that point.
I love that. And I don't think there's many cyber leaders out there that are openly expressing, I guess, their joy for building people up, seeing them succeed. I think that there's probably a contingent of individuals that tend to make it about themselves, rather than mentoring, this, sharing information, cross-pollinating initiatives, whether it's something like a graduate scheme or graduate mentoring, or maybe like local community outreach. I think it's really good to hear that. And yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe the future is something like some bizarre hybrid crossover of cyber and HR. I mean, that in itself could be relevant, because how many times do we see that where to many degrees cyber is a people issue? People say people are the problem, and it's like, well, is it really? And through a kind of HR wrap, that could be something that really helps, adherence to policies, creates a better dynamic and diverse culture, and kind of ties into something. So I think we might have actually just created something there.
Well, it's like customer based, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
So yeah. I mean, cybersecurity is a function, but everybody's our customer. And the goal is always for me to embed the knowledge, not just to give them, catch the fish form, but let's teach them to fish. Let's get them in there. And, fishing maybe is a bad example, but let's get in there and give them the knowledge they need to do this work without us being in there to hold their hand. And that's the whole point is how do we not dissolve cyber completely, but how do we dissolve it so that we've given that knowledge to the teams that know their business functions better than us, that understand what they're trying to achieve, and let them go do it with the guardrails in place that they can do it securely. That way you don't have to chase. I mean, the whole point is evangelizing. I remember speaking at a previous conference and I said, get out your snakeskin boots, because you've got to no longer sit behind a console. You're going to sell your program. You're getting out there and you're teaching and educating and helping others and understand why it's important to be cyber ready, because a team of 5 is not going to protect against the millions of the world attacking. However, if your whole company's got that knowledge to do what they need to do and successfully achieve their goals securely, you've now got an entire human firewall that's amazing. That's where we need to be. But a lot of teams are still looking at just, we're the security team, we're going to be the yes, no shop. There's no such thing as no. The business has to operate. You have to find a way to move forward. And that's how you do it, is bake it into these teams so that they can do it without you.
I love it. And then like on the one thing in cyber you think is BS and needs relevance or clarifying.
Oh man. The buzzwords are always the best ones to me. I mean, I love buzzwords. They're hilarious because, you hear them all the time, and it's always something new. Now it's AI. AI and machine learning have been in cyber for, 20 years plus probably. I mean, we've been using that stuff forever. It's just now become commercial. Zero trust is another one, right? Talking about all these different things. It really just comes down to secure what matters, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's pretty much it. So these buzzwords are always killing me because it's marketing. But it has good intention, but a lot of people are using it ineffectively, saying, we are a zero trust product, or we're a zero trust whatever, but they really aren't. I mean, they're saying we're zero trust, but we're protecting everything, but it's not how it always works. You have to focus on what the scope is and what's important to the business, what's most critical, and secure that. You can zero trust that, but to secure everything is almost impossible unless you have an unlimited budget and unlimited people. So I think that's the biggest BS piece for me, is if someone comes in and says we can secure everything with this tool or product or this team, you might as well find someone else at that point, because there's no such thing. You're not going to be able to secure it all unless you have an unlimited bankroll. Focus on what matters, right? So I think that's the biggest BS I see, is that overpromise and underdeliver. And I think people should be called out for that. And I think it's important that you bring in people that understand that you can't secure it all. And businesses are here to make money. We're here to be profit driven. We don't have unlimited budgets to spend on security. We have to bake it in and find out what matters most and secure it.
Nice. And what do you think we can do as leaders to try and change that whole, let's call it the weaponization of marketing? We're throwing acronyms at people, buzzwords, promise and snake oil. These things are just like, I think people are just getting overwhelmed by it. What do you think we can do to try and change it, if we can? Yeah.
Drop the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Drop the fear side of it. I think that's it. Business leaders are way more savvy. You can't walk in the room and say a data breach is going to cost us $4.5 million. Well, that might be the average bondman number, but this company's different. Our profits are different. The damages are different. Everything's self-assessed very differently. So you can't come in and say a data breach is going to cost you X dollars. That data is good to have in your back pocket, but you now have to build it off of what is actually real to the company that you're in. And talk about the effect of, or the likelihood of it happening. Because I mean, you might have controls in place that are solid and strong. You might not see that kind of damage. Maybe it's going to be 200,000, right? Then you know what you need to spend on your actual resiliency programs. I think learning the language of the business is the biggest piece. That hands down. I mean, security folks that grew up in security, we're doing alert management, we're doing security operations, we're investigating, we're doing forensics, we're collecting information and scouring logs. That's not going to sell at the leadership level. And I think we just have to do better as leaders, and to grow that muscle of, let's talk dollars and cents, outages, downtime, and things like that, because that's what matters. That's something that I think that we can all learn from. And most people growing up in security just don't have that muscle, right? That business acumen that you need to learn. So my advice for anyone in security is find someone who's in that, find a leader who will take you on as a mentee, and capitalize on that. I was lucky enough to have a lot of mentors in my career that knew that area, and then going through that Six Sigma course, it was all VPs and different managers that I could learn this from and sponge. And, I'm riding the shoulders of giants is how I say it. The reality is that I'm only here because of those around me that gave me what I needed to succeed. And I didn't squall that. I want to make sure that I'm giving back. And that's why I spend a lot of time with people as well.
Excellent. And then to conclude the episode tonight, then, Nick, would be, any learnings and advice from your journeys and your recovery as well. Is there anything that you'd like to share with people that, that you've learned, and that any advice you'd like to, pass on to anybody?
Yeah, biggest advice I can say is don't go at anything alone. If you're struggling, speak up, find anything. just find someone that's willing to speak to it. I mean, even myself, I'm always willing to talk to different people. And I have friends going through a lot of different things right now, and I'm always open. I can't solve their problems, but sometimes you just need an outlet and to share and to talk. Don't hide, right? Don't hide what your vulnerabilities are. Maybe in the business, you don't have to be as open about it like I am, but do share it with your social community or whoever you can to speak openly about it, because if you need help, you have to ask for it. Sometimes it's not going to come to you, especially in a company. People are very busy. People don't always have they have their own things going on in life where they can't always be there to help you and be a safety net. But some folks will listen. They just might not have the answer for you. So just be open, be transparent, and be real. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's very, very critical in cyber as well as in just your personal life. Just be a real person and be honest, but also be mindful of who you share that stuff with, because not everyone's your friend. And I've run into that too, where that psychological safety can be used against you. And I'd like to say there's a special place in hell for people that'll use that against you, but sometimes you just don't know. So you just have to be cautious and be mindful, but also be open and be real.
And thanks for that, Nick. And I completely agree. And, not that we're trying to put anyone off when it comes to, when you can find info, but some people just are wired different,
Yep.
and to them, they don't see your problem as a problem when in actual fact it is. And again, likewise, I would always recommend to people to, find the right group of folk, surround yourself with people who care, who are positive, and who will lift you up when you take a kicking. And I think that's definitely the most important thing. And again, anyone who is obviously in a situation where they're suffering from mental health, we will post various different helplines. We will also post various different sources of information in the channel, so we'll make that relevant to obviously UK and US. And again, Nick, thank you so much for sharing your insight, your story. The minute you posted on that Slack group, I was like, I need to get Nick on the podcast. And I really appreciate you being open, being transparent. There's so many people that will probably reach on the back of this episode. I think we're now approaching just shy of 30,000 subscribers as well. So let's hope that people support this message and spread this message as well. And hopefully people find some sort of some form of healing on the back of this as well. So again, Nick, thank you so much for your time. And everyone, please like, share, subscribe. And yeah, thanks again for your time, Nick.
Thanks, Leo.